This is another episode with Faith in Media's podcast. I'm so delighted to be here with our guests of honor. It's Andrew Maclean, Jenny Lee, and Mike Peacock. Thank you guys so much for joining us here at Faith in Media. How are you today?
Great, thanks for having us on.
Thank you for having
Very
us.
good, thank you.
Absolutely. I'm going to give you guys a chance just to kind of share a little bit about who you are. If we start with you, Andrew, tell us a little bit about yourself and just what you do so that our listeners just get an idea of who we are privileged to have in our conversation today, please.
Sure. I mean, I started in film in about 2001, doing, as you do, running and all that, making lots of tea and that sort of thing. Production assisting, started production managing, worked in a little bit of TV, worked on some shorts, some features, all sorts of things. And then hit my head against the wall and just every door slammed in my face and I couldn't figure out what was going on. And the good Lord sent me into the wilderness for 7 years.
Wow.
Completion. The wilderness being Royal Tunbridge Wells. I was hoping he was going to send me somewhere really exciting where my life was in danger. Turns out Royal Tunbridge Wells wasn't quite what I had in mind, but you know what? The Lord has a deeply unpleasant sense of humour sometimes, as you might know. So I got through that and then accidentally found myself back in film and then started working as head of film for Holy Trinity Brompton, started running the UK Christian Film Festival, which is where I met these two lovely people, with Ray Horowitz, and then started running my own production company. So now I do a lot of production, producing and directing primarily, but all sorts for lots of businesses and banks and local charities or whatever it might be. And I've been doing that for about 13 years, sometimes working in-house for other production companies, but primarily doing my own stuff. I'm here also doing the odd bit of actual storytelling in film, which is obviously why I suppose we all get into this. Yeah, so that's a little bit about me.
Love that. Thank you so much. What a great start to the conversation and introduction. Jenny, please tell us a little bit about yourself. It's such an honor to have you today.
Oh, thank you. It's an honor to be here, Carla. So I actually started my professional life in the financial services. So I trained as an actuary and I was bored out of my mind. So I got into a bit of filmmaking just because I needed an escape. I saw Almodovar, an Almodovar film, and I was like, I think I could do that. And so I did a couple of short films, and this is before I became a Christian. And then I had a really dramatic conversion. And I just really wanted to tell everyone how much God loved them, because it's the thing that changed my life. So I was just like, God, tell me how to do this. And what I felt he gave me was the film festival. So I now run the I Will Tell International Film Festival. We've been going for 17 years. This year we've got some BFI funding, which is amazing.
Congratulations. Amazing.
Birmingham as a pilot to going across the country with the love of God in incredible films that sometimes go on to win or be nominated for BAFTAs and Oscars. Sometimes they go into oblivion, but they're no less significant. And they are kingdom films. Some are explicitly Christian. There's some really interesting ones this year. And some are just wonderful films, like the story of blind and partially sighted people attempting to summit the highest mountain in LA County. And so things that we believe that are in God's heart and that it's a privilege to share. So, that's kind of what I do.
That's incredible. Thank you for sharing that, Jenny. I'm looking forward to delving very much into these stories as we go. And last but not least, Mike, please tell us a little bit about what you do.
Hello. Well, in a nutshell, myself and my good wife, not that I've got a bad wife as well, but my Becky,
great start.
Excellent.
Yeah, no, we ran. We both trained as actors originally. Then we set up a theatre company back in 2001, a Christian theatre company, to do a 6-week project, which ended up lasting for 19 years.
Wow.
We closed that down in 2020. for I can't remember what it was happened that year. There was some sort of significant event.
Nothing important. Don't worry about it.
Basically,
The biggest global pause ever. Yes.
To be honest, it was a real God thing, because we'd been sensing that we were being called into a different direction for a long time, and yet we hadn't been able to see how that was going to work practically. And so when those doors were closed for us, we had no choice but to start exploring other avenues. So we run online resources, we write books, and we are currently shooting our first feature film at the moment. So irons in different fires a lot.
Wow. I just feel like I feel amongst some very, very big general type people on today's panel. This is incredible to have you both. I think my first question, and I'm sure whoever comes across this path, particularly as we are a media focused podcast, is what is it like trying to navigate and succeed in an industry like film as a Christian? Jenny, I wonder if you wouldn't mind sharing this from your perspective first and foremost.
Yeah, it's very challenging, because the whole world has this notion of the faith secular divide, and I believe all things belong to God, which is why we are very comfortable with putting explicitly Christian evangelistic films alongside kingdom films that never mention the name of Jesus, because I think it's all His. And so the real challenge that I've encountered is getting people to not pigeonhole us into one or the other, right? So are you Christian or are you not? You know, and what does that mean in terms of the films we show, and being able to talk to people about the love of God without switching over into proselytizing, and being and honoring the calling, because I've had 17 years of learning that God didn't call me to do a church. He called me to do a film festival, and working that in, because we grow up with this faith secular divide, and just coming to a different understanding of it. That's been my hardest challenge, my own understanding of it, and then being able to communicate that clearly to others.
That's incredible. Andrew, you have probably quite a different space that you occupy with your use of the craft of film. What has that been like? Because you mentioned, previously, like your collaborations have involved, rather large names that we'll all be familiar with in our everyday life. Being a Christian, a person of faith, navigating that industry, what has that been like for yourself on that side?
I'm with Jenny. I think we're called to be salt and light. And if you go for dinner and somebody hands you a bowl of salt, tuck in, that's probably not what I think. There is certainly I think there's a space for Christian films. I think The Chosen, that sort of stuff, I think really changes the conversation. I think it's we've seen a huge shift. I think that's great. But I think a lot of the time we're called to be light in the darkness, and that means being in the darkness. Luckily, being the gobby man that I am am generally able to walk into, the boardroom of Lloyd's and talk to everybody, and I will accidentally talk about God because I can't not. And I will talk about my faith and my journey and what I'm going through at the moment, and God's just quite good. And I think the thing that I've seen change in that, when I suppose I started in 2001, 2000, left university, is that I used to talk about being a Christian and people go, what, why, why are you saying those words? It burns, get away from me. And I think now I can say, I'm a Christian, and at the moment I'm going through the process of adoption, and I say, I really felt it was the right time. I started this new church, and it turns out it was Adoption Sunday, and we'd been thinking about adoption. We felt really that was, and everyone, regardless of what, everybody goes, wow, someone's trying to tell you something. You go, yes. And I think being able to talk about where you are, and if your life is bashing up against God quite a lot, then it's hard not to talk about him, because when people ask you about what you did on Thursday, it's hard not to say, well, I was doing this thing to do with God, and it comes out. And I think that the as I say, the big thing that has changed is people are willing to hear you and be open-minded, and especially if you have a skill like filmmaking, which now I'm just rambling. There's this lovely thing when I love going to businesses, because it's like their day where, wow, the film crew are here. It's so exciting. This is my day to my close-up, Mr. DeVille. This is my moment, as Martin McClutchan would say. And to be that person means that you're already a little bit on the pedestal. And if you then talk with open frankness about your faith, people go, oh, maybe it's not just nutcases and old ladies. Okay, gosh, who knew? And I think that's what salt looks like. It just makes the food better.
I love that analogy. How wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Mike, again, theatre into film. Tell us about what that's been like. Your company is so very overtly, this is our mission, this is our purpose. Huge commission upon you, what you're doing. What has that been like?
Well, I wasn't feeling too pressured until you started saying all that. No, it's been real. I think we're kind of in a process of transition, really, because we did start very much. I mean, when we started the theatre company, it was very much sort of mission focused, and it was kind of, we were doing lots of education, lots of schools. We were kind of quite in a Christian sort of bubble. Whereas in more recent years, we have felt that actually we need to step outside of that bubble. And so the kind of projects, I mean, we still are doing some Christian projects, but actually we're sort of feeling more called to do, I suppose you could call it kingdom values type things. So things with a Christian heart, which are about, grace and hope, front and center. So we so our current film project, our film, we've made a number of short films to do with things like sort of human trafficking, things like that. So we'll look at issue-based things. And our film that we're making at the moment it's rather unusual. It's a community project, really. So we felt kind of it was a God-led thing, that we have basically, we've been working with a community on an estate in Wythenshawe in Manchester, which there's a lot of people from quite challenging backgrounds. And so what we've been doing is we've been meeting for the last year and training people in filmmaking and in acting and getting them to create the film. So it's kind of, we are making a feature film, but we're also kind of doing a project which is about bringing people together and building them up and kind of giving them something to feel really proud of. So it's a project within a project at the moment. And a lot of those people we've got to know through the church, because we kind of needed to start somewhere, and we needed somewhere we could meet. But we've also got, we've brought in kind of outside crew, camera and sound, and people who aren't necessarily from a faith background. So we've kind of been meshing these two worlds together. And so that's been a bit of an interesting journey, really, and how those conversations have developed without us sort of seeking to, evangelize everybody necessarily, but yet kind of things kind of organically start to develop just through relationships being built. What was the question? Sorry.
You answered it. What it's like actually navigating that as a Christian. But I love that there's such a diverse arrangement of experiences that's been spoken about already. So I love that you said that. And I think even the way that you speak about it, and if we were just to take a quick step back, listening to the longevity of everybody's, the spans of the careers that you've experienced so far is not short. 17 years, 12 years for the I Will Tell. Did I get that correct? Or was it a different
17
number?
for I Will Tell.
Sorry, 17 years. We're looking at, we've crossed over a decade in years already across the board with what's represented here. this indicates to me there is a real passion and a love for what you all do. I guess my question is, what is it that you love so much about being in the spaces that you're occupying, particularly with film? Mike, I know you've spoken about your transitioning in there, but it sounds like that passion is really still kind of just transferred over from the last space you occupied in theatre. What is that you love so much about what you're doing with your project and your feature films, and just the training that you're providing for other people coming up underneath in the next generation?
I guess it's a love of story, really, at the end of the day. You know, I've always loved writing stories, telling stories, whether that's been, as I say, I originally went to drama school to be an actor, whether it's through writing something in a book. I just kind of love telling stories. I love seeing things come to life. And I think this particular project at the moment, I just kind of love the way that people have come together over it. And I think when you get that sort of collaborative atmosphere, when everyone's working together towards a goal and really working, supporting each other and kind of rooting for each other as well. Yeah, I think that's wonderful. That's fantastic. And you know, if you can tell a story which you feel has got, it isn't just for your own enjoyment, but actually you feel as though you've got something that you really want to communicate to other people because you think it's going to bring a blessing to their life. Yeah, that's the real motivation, I think, for me.
Yeah, I love that. Jenny, please share. I mean, 17 years with I Will Tell. That is a passion not to be questioned whatsoever. What is it that you love about doing what you're doing? What you've been able to create through film and you and that relationship?
Yeah, I mean, before I answer that, I wonder if anybody else feels really old right now with all the years.
That's not what I was thinking whatsoever. If anything, I feel like these people are very, like, these are serious practitioners in the field. I respect it. I do.
Yeah,
seriously old.
I think film is wonderful, and if you look at, you know, just the scripting and the editing and the pacing and the cinematography, film itself is a really beautiful art form, which I could just get immersed in regardless. But the thing that really drives me is that I think we think in stories, and so a lot of the way we frame our interactions with other people, because of a running story at the back of our minds about who this person is, right? And so what we have in the world is a dearth of diversity of storytelling, and so there is just if you think of most of the films that are distributed, there is a handful of distributors that have their own unique perspective, and that's what we get shown. So I am really passionate, obviously, with a title like I Will Tell, about celebrating the untold stories, those stories that we often wouldn't hear about, and those stories that really make up the tapestry of life. That you know, otherwise we have holes missing in the structure of who we are. So I love being able to give an award to someone from a country where the industry is only just coming up, and it means the world to them to get an award from an international film festival based in London, and they have produced quality work. It wasn't a charity kind of award, right? I love being able to hear the stories of people who have been vulnerable enough to share profound things about their history, so that the world could be a better place. And the really amazing thing about I Will Tell is this is what I think about I Will Tell anyway. We always have a Q&A after each screening. And so that's with the filmmakers and with subject matter experts in an open conversation with the audience. And somehow we have this amazing space that facilitates people being incredibly vulnerable, probably kind of spurred on by the vulnerability shown in the film and the level of sacrifice that are shown in some of the films. And people share the most incredible things, and sometimes saying admittedly that openly that they've not shared this before. So, you know, whoever's with them, it's the first time they're hearing crying, and I thought, ooh, you were pretty brave. But I love that. It's the incredible sacrifice of the filmmakers. We've shown films like Burma VJ, which was filmed back, in the Burma Republic when there was a fast by the Buddhist monks. They turned down their bowls in public space, and you probably remember the story from many years ago. Those of you as old as me, and they were beaten up, they were killed. It was absolutely horrendous, and filmmaking was forbidden. So people had cameras under their armpits, and were trying to capture this footage, and then sneaked it across the border. And it took about 5 years to put that film together. That told us this incredible story of what was really happening at the time. And that level of sacrifice and passion that our filmmakers give is really inspiring to me. And all I have to do is show the film, and what a privilege that is. And then we interact with this incredible audience who often have significant experiences connecting with the issues in the film. And share. We've had incredible people just pop up in the audience, and I was like, "Oh, I wish I knew you were here. We would have, told people about that." But it's really incredible, and it is an incredible privilege to be part of creating that space where that magic happens. Basically, yeah.
I love that so much. And I think what you're talking about is amplifying the stories, particularly of those that are maybe not popular or untold. And I feel, and I think you mentioned earlier, there's not enough contribution to this kind of this space. Why do you think that is? And what should we be doing about it with those of us who are not just necessarily behind, the drive of filmmaking or the drive of what makes, what kind of like defines those that are involved with filmmaking? Why are we not occupying the space more, specifically in the UK? I think specifically as we've seen things like in the USA, somebody mentioned The Chosen earlier, and we're speaking about the Jesus Revolution that had such high production values on the public stage. I don't hear that so much from here in the UK. I would love to see that more, but why do you think it is not as, should I say, represented as widely?
Yeah, well, one of the things I think people should support the I Will Tell Film Festival a lot more, and we can get more of these things in the public.
Let's do that.
Much wider than that.
Famous bug. That's what we're here.
but much wider than that, and more seriously, there's an interesting relationship that the UK has with diversity compared with America, for instance. One of the stories that we're showing this year is a short film called The Black Englishman, which tells the story of Paul Stevenson, who was really pivotal in the Bristol bus boycott, and that led to the Race Relations Act in the UK. Now, he did a lot of work at the same time that Nelson Mandela was doing a lot of work in South Africa, and that and obviously Martin Luther King Jr. was doing a lot of work in the US. And in fact, he was inspired by the Rosa Parks story for, to do what he did. And there have been incredible, you have this collective conscience of things that happen. There have been incredible parallels. We could do what happened there. But it's interesting to me that he has never got that accolade. And most people outside of Bristol don't have a clue who he is. Or don't really fully know the story. And certainly most people outside of the UK have never heard of him. And I think that's partly, it's partly a class thing. It's partly a, we don't have that problem over here, surely, in the UK. And, certainly when we've shown films that deal with race at the film festival, we've had people say, that's an American problem. We don't have that issue here. And one of the amazing things that's been happening, since the murder of George Floyd and the mass global protests is this widening awareness of issues to do with diversity and equity. And I think things really are changing. So that's just one aspect of diversity, right? If you look at the faith aspect, for instance, why we don't have so many faith films as well, there are similar parallels as to why that happens. And lack of understanding of the church, of the incredible tool that film is for the mission of the church. And I don't sound critical because I know that's changing significantly. And the fact that we still exist means that there are people who have been supporting incredible. There are lots of organizations I could shout out that are doing incredible work in this area, but there's a lot more work to be done. And I think a lot of it is the mindset. And the more we push, we we just have to do the sacrifice of bringing these kinds of stories out there. And eventually, I think we'll be able to start pushing the boundary back. That's
Yeah.
2 cents.
That's incredible. And I love what you've just shared in terms of how there is a way to engage with this in a way that is, as much as we amplify the need for equity and inclusivity or diversity in that sense, it does require everybody to get involved, because it's not just, it is perhaps about one community that might be on the marginalized or receiving end of the poor equity or no equity at all, and underrepresentation, but it requires us to do the work of amplifying our brothers or sisters who are experiencing that. So I really love that even what you're saying includes a sense of community. It includes a kind of like a call to rally together. And I love that that's what's happening with the work that what you're doing in creating the forum for And I Will Tell. Andrew, talk to us a little bit about First Last Film. How did this come about, and kind of explain the journey a little bit there with what it's been doing on the stage and on the platform that you're occupying right now?
Sure. Well, I suppose I'd started off, as I said, doing all bits of film. I go back a little bit, because you asked the guys what they loved about it, and I think similarly, obviously, I watched films as a kid, and The Goonies and Star Wars, and all the reasons I love film, and fell in love with those things, and loved those stories and the way it spoke to me directly, and I loved all of the bits of that. And then having worked in film and been a little bit bitten by the whole thing, I was like, ugh. Whereas corporate films, I was like, actually, I can do that. It's work, it's job. But learning the things that I love, if you've done personality stuff like Myers-Briggs or anything like that, I love that. There are those 3 lists of gifts in the New Testament. You've got the Holy Spirit gift. You've got the parts of the church you take up, and the third one is almost personality types. One of them is an exhorter, and that's about, and it sounds from what I'm hearing about Mike, that he must be an exhorter. It's about building people up, seeing who they are and building them into being who they are. And I think that's very much my heart. I see people quite quickly. I understand people quite quickly. I'm fascinated by those personality types. And as a director, if I can see who a person is, walk past their insecurities, which they will necessarily have, and build them up and help them to find their voice. That's the dream to me. And so being in the middle of a set, I'm also a geek. So I love cameras. I love editing. I love all that process. I love the bits. But I love people, and I love story and drawing those stories out. And obviously, having worked in a Christian context, being at Holy Trinity Brompton, and finding stories to pull out there in an interesting and new way, that's something I'm really passionate about. And doing it in films and telling my own stories. And I've got little. There's a very weird YouTube channel I set up called Teddy and the Bears, where I just told a bunch of stories with my teddy bears, because I couldn't afford the actors. So I made 9 episodes of this very silly thing with the teddy bears, and it was about God, and it was about people, and it was about relationships, and the camera moved and the teddies didn't, and then you'd move the teddies and then they'd talk to each other. It was all very silly. But what it comes back to for me is finding those stories that speak directly into people. I had a meeting with a client today, and they'd made a very long, very dull film, and they said, we'd like something a bit like this. And I said, we can, or yes, and he said to his actor friend at the bottom, yes, and we could also do something better, whereby we make something which is relationship orientated, which actually makes people care. And I think that's what film should be. And I often, and poor Jenny's heard me go on about this before, but I think my feeling from when I worked at the Christian Film Festival was that a lot of Christian films teach the basic gospel to Christians. And to me, that's absolute nonsense. Christians already know the gospel. They don't need the basic gospel. Stop it. So either preach the basic gospel to non-Christians in a non-Christian way. Don't mess around. Drugs, rock and roll, meet them where they are.
Yeah.
Or preach depth to people who are already Christians. Take them to the next level. Take them above and beyond. Challenge them, grow them, take them where they aren't. But at the moment, the reason for me that Christian films haven't been picked up, I'm a Christian, I'm a film geek, and I struggle to watch Christian films because they ignore the basic rules of filmmaking a lot of the time. I don't relate to them, and I don't care because I know this bit of gospel because I've heard it a million times. And I think there's I think the chunk of where Christian films should be is in one of those two camps. And sadly, they're all in the middle at the moment for me.
Yeah.
How do we change that? Please, sorry, Jenny, please go ahead. Go ahead.
Sorry. I just wanted to jump in defense of kind of Christian filmmakers as well.
Sorry, Jenny, I love you.
No, Andrew, I hear you because I have to go through all these submissions we get every year, right? And so I agree with you 100%. And there's a lot of work we're trying to do to create forums for people to have these conversations and get the right training and so on. But there are a lot of amazing Christian filmmakers out there still. There are a lot of amazing films that we get, and we only find out in the Q&A. Or sometimes afterwards that the filmmaker is Christian because it's kind of a kingdom film rather than the Christian film. It's what you're talking about. And there are some, and this year we have had more Christian films accepted in the film festival than ever before because often we can't because it would, as much I would want to tell everybody about Jesus, it just isn't right to have a film that's not the right level of excellence next to others. But that has really changed this year.
Wow.
And one film that I think you would love, and I'm sorry if this sounds like a shameless plug, I can tell you about it afterwards.
It's really fine.
It's a film called Nefarious by the guys who did God's Not Dead, and it's a very different film from God's Not Dead. And it's kind of Screwtape Letters meets Silence of the Lambs. And it's very, very interesting. And so it's just so exciting to see filmmakers creating that, Christian filmmakers intentionally creating that kind of work. And I hear you, Andrew. I was complaining before, right? So but there's lots to be celebrated as well, and so much that I was so excited this year by the number of quality films that we had submitted.
I got out of it a long time ago. So Jenny, you're the guru. I trust you.
Andrew, you said you've got out of it, and I understand what you're saying because I think that kind of feeling towards Christian films is not uncommon amongst the Christian community. We struggle to find the high standard of what we're looking for, even in when you spoke about basic rules of filmmaking, I am none the wiser to that at all. I didn't realize there was code for this. I wish someone would tell me. I want to know. Because like you, I feel like
great book.
Because I just need to look in the Old Testament. There is enough gore in there to make incredible films, but I don't see the satisfaction of that sometimes when we have some of these put on our silver screen. And I guess my question is you clearly have the vision for it. You have the passion. Do you think that you would ever get back involved with someone that has the vision as to what it should look like? If not collaborating with wonderful people like Jenny, who's
come on, Andrew,
like a kindred spirit to you. Is there a space for that here in England? What I love about English films in comparison, real English stories in comparison to some of the things that we see in the very polished style of American films, and this is not a diss or a negative comparison at all because I love them both. But what I love about British film making or the stories, you know, I just feel like it's that depth that you spoke about. I need to see the depth of the story. And I feel like I can really connect with its people. Where sometimes I feel like with American films, I associate sometimes very action based. There's a polish, that kind of thing. But that you've got me wanting
a healthy
more.
dose of British cynicism is what
Do
we
you
need in our Christian
know?
films.
But just those are real questions, real things to engage with. And do you think you'd ever step into that space? Because you have,
I mean, absolutely.
everything.
I think it's one of the things I do. I want to. It's funny. I was just on the phone to a manager in Hollywood, who weirdly happens to be my sister, who was saying exactly the same thing. Come on, Andrew, now stop messing around. I've got a couple of scripts. Come on, and
Wow.
yes, absolutely. I think I think I said this last time, Jenny. So I'm sorry, but I wonder if God is starting to call me further back to that. But I know for a long time that door was closed, and I think, as with all of our walks, you know, I talked about my weird wilderness in the Royal Tunbridge Wells. I think our journeys take us a funny route, and I think God's been working on a number of skills, because I would have been loath to make a film which was rubbish, and I definitely would have done. And having worked in the secular world, they don't stand for that. I mean, some people do, but they don't generally at the higher levels. And so you have to hone different skills. And so, yes, I think I wonder if God is calling me something else. I've been wanting to do some good stuff for a bit. We'll see. But as I say, at the moment, I suppose I feel like I'm salt in the rubbish food, or light in the darkness, rather than necessarily making the Christian film. I don't know.
Yeah, that's.
Sorry, Mike. What I want to hear yours more about.
Yeah, I was just about to say the same thing.
I guess I think where we are at the moment is, I guess, because we were very much doing Christian stuff. It was about, majority was Bible stories. It was gospel-y. It was Bible themed. I think it's kind of, we're in a phase where we're moving out of that into not sort of being underneath, feeling kind of like we've got the label Christian strapped across everything that we do. I mean, we still are. We haven't renounced our faith or anything like that. But in terms of our work, and I think that, you know, certainly my experience has been that in terms of doing anything that's kind of Christian art, creative, whatever, I think sometimes there can be, from some quarters, some people in the church can kind of go, oh, it's Christian art, and we'll slightly dismiss it, and that's your little hobby thing sort of over there. And I think people in the industry kind of go, oh, it's a Christian thing, is it? Oh, well, it's going to be rubbish, and you're just kind of on it. So I've certainly experienced a degree of that. And so I think that's part of the reason why we sort of felt as though we wanted to establish ourselves without necessarily having labels, and people just take us as we are. But also, it's the stories that have been put on our hearts over the last couple of years. I would like to definitely go back to doing some, you know, more overtly Christian material. I'm definitely not against that, and I think there is going to be a time for doing that. But I think in this season where we're at, we kind of feel called to engage with people who wouldn't necessarily be drawn to a Christian project, but kind of who are interested in a hope-filled project, or a project that's about, you know, better relationships amongst people. So kind of, yeah. So I think sort of kingdom values is what's on our heart at the moment to do projects about. But I definitely see some Bible stuff further down the road as well.
I would love to know, you've all kind of shared in some shape or form just about you know, the challenges that come with being within this industry, the challenges that come with being a faith person in this industry, the challenges of what it means to have the right to have a seat at the table, to create in this industry. You've all kind of alluded to that in some shape or form. And we've also acknowledged quite admirably about the longevity of the career expanses that you've all enjoyed and experienced this long. My question is, how have you been able to stay to the path? Why have you not left? What has kept you on track to stay despite many challenges that you've kind of listed already? Mike, I'll ask you that first, if that's okay.
My accountant asked me that question recently.
Yours too.
Real talk. I love it. Right.
No, oh gosh. Yeah. Why are we still doing what we do? I think the thing that pops into mind, and this is just randomly popped into my mind, is just there's a bit in when Jesus is talking to his disciples, and I really wish I could remember where it was. Definitely New Testament. But a lot of people are abandoning the faith, are going away from him, and he says to them, "You're not going to abandon me as well." And they said, "Well, to who else are we going to go? What else are we going to do?" And I think, in some ways, I feel as though I don't really know how to describe this. Actually, this feels like a therapy session. But I think there are other pathways we could have gone, but I just feel as though God has just kept steering us along this pathway, and I kind of feel as though that's what I've been made to do, to tell stories. So I think anything else I do, whenever that's kind of passing, just earning money and things, I feel slightly as though, I don't know, kind of compromised in a way that I'm kind of not doing what I was supposed to do. And yet so often the circumstances of trying to follow this path and trying to be in the arts are so challenging, obviously the biggest one is always finance. There's always so many obstacles and so many hoops to jump through, and so many opportunities to give up, that maybe I'm just too dumb to give up. I don't know. I just keep on going, just keep on doing what we do, and I just feel as though that's where God's got us. And we just got to keep trusting that He knows how this is going to work better than we do, and so we just kind of keep pushing in faith-wise, keep listening to Him, and I think God has never been very good at maths in my experience, and if you think of the Bible, we sort of 5 loaves and a few fish there. Yeah, that'll feed 5,000 people. And your brain is going, no, that doesn't work. But God's going, yeah, it's going to work. It'll be fine. Trust me. So, yeah, you've got to keep muddling through.
Yeah, that's so powerful. I just appreciate your honesty with it. And I think this is something that I think we all need to hear sometimes, because I can't imagine how many times it would not make sense. But there is a knowing that I need to stay here for reasons I can't always explain. But that sense of compelling and call to be and occupy that space and to not be there would feel compromising somewhat. Jenny, share with us a little bit about how 17 years is no joke, hosting an event like that, sourcing stories from places that nobody else is willing to go looking, how much that probably costs you more than it does the recipients in every shape or form. You mentioned the word sacrifice so many times. What has kept you keeping to move within this direction and stay there so faithfully?
Yeah, it's actually really...
Jenny, before you say anything, can I just say, for everybody else who doesn't know, film festivals last 2 years. That's how long they last. To make a film festival last 17 years is unbelievable. And it's a massive tip to my hat to Jenny. We ran the UK Christian Film Festival, lasted 1 year, and you've done it so long, it's unbelievable. And all the people in the industry know they last 2 years. So amazing.
Thank you, Andrew. That's really encouraging. That's really encouraging.
Yeah.
And I will definitely echo what Mike has said, and that sometimes it's just stupidity. but for me, it's I feel like God gave me a really clear picture of what the festival is going to be when it comes into its fullness. And to my mind, until I see that, I've got to keep going. And I feel like I was reflecting on this, I think, yesterday and today, that we all have this sphere of influence. And there's a development that has to happen in us before we can truly influence that sphere the way we need to. And all of the major players, and of course we are all major players, we are sons of God, right? But all the major players in the Bible, it took them 17, 18 or longer years before they could become everything that God told them 2 decades before. And I think it's because of that. So that being patient with that process in myself is also what's helped. And God has a really kind way of just giving you little tidbits to let you know that he's with you when it really seems like like what's going on. And my entire family, I mean, even my great nieces and nephews are like, what are you doing? You used to be a successful actor. What happened? And so it's literally just holding on to him. And the funding we got to expand to Bristol and Birmingham this year was one of those, because I was really at the place where I'd be completely transparent. I hope I don't regret this, but where I just, typically if we don't get enough, I'll just put in whatever I can. And I was at the place where I could not do that. So I was like, God, you've got to come through or else we can't do this. Yeah. And so it's really good to be in that place where he says, I am in this and I want you to do it. But it is tough. It is tough, but it's absolutely worth it. And yeah, he uses he collects our tears and uses them for good. And it's a powerful thing, because we are, it's not just film, we're dealing with real people's lives. And yes, really important. And we're dealing with people understanding a God, people who would never step into church, people who may not have too much of a longer conversation once they feel the burn of the fact that you're a Christian, like Andrew said. It's so important. It's so important. I'll just say anyway, because I've started. I don't want to get to heaven. Obviously, I want to get to heaven. I will, because of Jesus. But I don't want to get to heaven and see all the people that I could have impacted not making it because of something I could have done. And that I don't want to take responsibility for people's salvation, but you just have to do all you can, So yeah, that's what keeps me going.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That's so inspiring to hear and so encouraging as well. Andrew, last but not least, I'm going to ask you the same question. What has kept you going? Why? You've mentioned there has been, an emotional relationship, a difficult relationship with staying on track, from the way that you've described your experience and just the longevity of your history with being within the film space. What has kept you here? Why have you not abandoned?
I think you're really right. I mean, at the moment, I have clients, which is, for most freelancers, spotty at best, especially in the middle of what looks like is going to turn into a recession any second. But it's called First Last Film because the first shall be last, and that was the crazy journey I'd been on, that I felt like I was the last, and that God, that eschatological reversal, that God wanted to make what was first last and what was last first. My wife and I just married. I lost my job, started working in films. I had a battered old 5D Mark II to start making films with, and just scraped by and we genuinely to this day look at the books and go, I don't know, exactly at Mike's point, I can't, this is what we had coming in, this is what we had outgoing, and they just don't match. I don't know how that works. And that happens one month and you think, okay, that's just bad accounting. And then it happens the second month, the third month. And I mean, to the point where I remember we once went, okay, right, Lord, you're going to have to do something amazing because otherwise we're not paying rent tomorrow. And then this client who I never thought was going to pay me turned around and went, oh, here's this. And it's exactly the amount of the rent. Working for a Christian TV company years before, God started talking to me about giving money to the church. I was like, well, I can't quite put food in my mouth, Lord, so I'm not sure how you... And God starts going, no, seriously. All right, well, okay. I'll see you when I die and I come to heaven then, Lord. There you go. And blow me down again, a job they never were going to pay me, sent me a check in the post, plus enough money for money to the church and a beer. And I thought, well, that's just kind, and I think, but the thing we've talked about story, the thing that God does care about is story. I think he's obsessed with story. And the greatest adventures don't start with Bilbo had to get rid of the ring, so put it in a furnace and it was done. That's not an adventure. That's not a story. He doesn't care about that. He cares about adventure. And adventure looks like a bloody nose battered around the back of your face. It looks like bloody hands and raw work and pain and hurt and learning and not always, but if sometimes that is the season and that's what it looks like. And I think, again, talking about personality types, my personality type as an exhorter is I believe the lesson is sowing and reaping. And I used to sow one seed and go, well, that hasn't turned into a crop. I don't know what's going on. Or I contacted that one client and they didn't come back, or I sent out that one CV, or I did that one thing. And the lesson I suppose I've learned through my bloody noses and bloody things has been that for me, that's my personality type is learning to sow so that I can reap, and that those who sow in tears will reap in joy. And having been through those times of literally weeping and weeping and weeping and saying, right, Lord, I'm ready for death now. This is enough. And then coming through and going, oh, yeah, you got different plans, and understanding seasons, as Mike was talking about. I think that's the adventure. The adventure is when you get to the end and you go, oh, and allowing yourself times, because I think this is the other struggle. The second you get through the bloody time, you get so relieved. What's next? And you don't allow yourself that moment to go, oh, this is nice. Oh, yeah. And I think, especially as Christians, we can be a bit driven and not able to go, this is good. I rejoice in this good time, and I thank you for the thing that's taken me this journey and this adventure.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was a very long,
but
weird...
it was very good. Very good.
I totally relate to everything that you said there. 100%.
Same.
I think there is so much to be said about. A lot of the time, I think we are wired, certainly within Western culture, to think about, I need to have reached X amount of destinations and that's my success. But so often we find on this Christian journey, and I love the way that you've used your analogy of the Frodo Baggins, very long adventure situation, is the gold is actually within the process of getting from one level with God to another. And it's not even about the things, it's what he's doing and curating and forging inside of us along every single one of those steps, the bloody nose steps, the mountaintop steps, all of these moments, the privileges of enrichment that only happen in things sometimes that are not always rewarded by material, accolade or anything like that comes along that way. And it's just so good to hear that from such established people like yourselves who are operating within this space. And this leads so beautifully to, as we come to the kind of close of this conversation this evening, I want to thank you all for sharing so candidly what this process really means for you. It's really been incredibly moving. And I know anyone else that comes across this conversation, I'm sure will be equally as inspired and encouraged. But what piece of advice would you leave for others who are starting on their journey of adventure within film or within the creative spaces that you guys are occupying? Please feel free to speak at will with that one. I'd love to hear something from you all on what you would kind of share as a tip or piece of advice.
I think for me, he says speak up first because he's the loud one. The failure is, what's that old song? Somebody might know it. A saint is just a sinner who fell down but got up.
Yeah.
I think that's the key. Being willing to fail and just like break your neck and face against the wall as you run rugby tackle through it. Being willing to go and break your face as you hit that wall that hard, and get up and try again and keep going is the key to any success. And the more times you run at the wall, the stronger you get and the more durable you become and the stronger we get. Because as you've all said, this isn't the end goal. This is just the staging room for going back into the garden to eat from the second tree so we can live forever. This is, do we get through that? Do we get through the gate? This is all. That's all. This tiny breath of 80 years or 90 years, whatever it is, that's it. And by doing the strength training that is running at a brick wall, we are able, that's our sewing so that we can read. That's our strength training so that we can lift this one ring. That is our journey, and I think that's our call.
Amazing.
Awesome. I think I would probably add to that, to know that you're not alone, because it can sometimes feel like a really lonely journey. And I have been amazed over the years at the number of people who've been watching me or who've been either silently or come forward to support. And there are incredible people in the industry who are ready to support you, and just don't come with the mindset that you're kind of doing this on your own and nobody cares and nobody's helping and it's because I'm a good Christian and the devil is against me, and it's keep your mind open to these wonderful angels that God has put in the industry for you. There are many of them, and yeah, you're definitely not alone.
Love that. Thank you.
I think I would say, I think sort of keep your eyes on God, really, and keep Him as the most important thing, and that your work, your ministry, your projects don't become elevated above Him, and that He's going to, when you're focused on Him, He's going to guide things in different seasons and different timings, and quite often my experience of trying to follow is that those things don't always make sense to myself. I can see quite an obvious way that I think things should go, but He seems to have a mind of His own, and
stop it,
and thinks that He knows better than me. So I just you've got to trust in that, even when you can't figure it out, you can't see how all this works, but just keep your eyes fixed on Him and trust Him, and know that the path that He's got for you is very, very unique. Where I am now, I didn't necessarily think I'd be 20 years ago, but now with hindsight I can see, oh, I see, that was actually leading around there, actually that's built upon that thing there, which to me at the time was sort of almost going to be seemingly unconnected or even random events, but now you start to see patterns in them. So yeah, keep God front and center, and everything else will fall into place.
Mike, Andrew, and Jenny, it's been an absolute privilege having you here today. Thank you so much for sharing just your stories and your encouragements. I know that others that come across this conversation will be motivated to stay the course. I think if I've taken anything from this conversation is literally, there is so much reward in just staying to the course, just staying fixated on, as you said, what God is doing. you didn't mistake hearing that call in the first place. Just keep walking one step in front of the other and believe for the best, and that he's not left you alone. What a wonderful thing to know, that we know that the challenges are going to come. And whether it's in film or whether it's in something else, challenges are going to come. But I think in principle, all of the things that you've shared are kind of pillars to hold us and kind of like anchors to keep us focused on what God is going to bring us into. So I want to thank you all for sharing what you have done this evening, and God bless you all in all of your endeavors. Please make sure that you follow Mike, that you follow Jenny, that you follow Andrew and all of their endeavors. There'll be more information about how to keep up with their work. And thank you guys so much for being with us today. God bless you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
It's a
Carla.
pleasure. Thank you for having us.
It's been a pleasure.